Borders, and I'm here with three amazing clowns. Today is May 1st, and for a lot of the world, this is Labor Day. In the world of American circus, this is a day of celebrating artists who usually the 1st of May is like a nickname for somebody who's on the circus for the first time. So today we're talking to clowns who this past year went on their first tour with Clowns Without Borders. I'm gonna have everybody introduce themselves, and Ania, we'll start with you. Who are you? Where are you? What kind of clown are you?
Hi, I'm Ania Upstill. I'm in New Zealand currently, and I am a very joyful clown.
My name's Dustin Allen. I'm in northern British Columbia in Western Canada right now. And when I was with Clowns Without Borders, I was a musical clown who fell down a lot.
Hi, I'm Melissa Aston. I'm actually from Vancouver, BC, another Canadian.
Nice.
What kind of clown am I? I'm mostly Cosmo. Cosmo is who I am. Very clueless, somewhat conceited, and not very smart. Yeah, that's who I am.
That's who you are as a clown, and not a person, I will say.
Very smart as a person, very smart, very intelligent.
Having the pleasure of worked with you. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your first tour. So if you could just say where your first tour with CWB was and kind of why CWB was there. Ania, we're going to you.
Oh, my first tour was in Palestine, and the aim there was actually to both help upskill some clowns that are already working in Palestine, so partnering with a theater company, and helping address the very difficult and sort of traumatic experience of living under occupation. So bringing joy to Palestinians, specifically Palestinian children living under occupation.
Thank you. And Dustin?
I was on the Balkan tour last February or 2 Februaries ago, I guess. So it was through Bosnia, Serbia, and then up to Romania, and we were performing in like official camps and some unofficial camps of displaced people who were moving from all over the Middle East and Africa, kind of largely on foot, trying to get through usually Slovenia, through Italy into Western Europe. And they had been, staying at these camps for anywhere between a couple of weeks and, over a year. So we went through, and the situation was different in Bosnia and Serbia than it was in Romania. But that was the gist of what we did for about 3-4 weeks.
So that was last September 2019. I went with a group to Brazil, to the state of Mato Grosso do Sul. And in particular, we were staying in a town called Dourados, and we were really just there, kind of providing some sort of comic relief to the indigenous populations there, mostly the Guarani people that have been displaced through agriculture. So we were, going out and visiting their areas. Their
Thank you. Yeah. So what made you want to work with Clowns Without Borders? And I'd love to know, sort of what part of how it was maybe similar to your circus and performing background, and how you learned about it, just a little bit of how you even ended up in the database. Ania.
I heard about Clowns Without Borders a few years ago before I was actually a clown, and was like, that's amazing, but didn't think it would be something that I could do. And then I went to Del Arte International in California, which is a physical theater school, and I learned clowning there. And one of the faculty members is involved with Clowns Without Borders. So Saida Trio actually sort of did a whole seminar on Clowns Without Borders for us, which made me really want to do it. And then she was very encouraging of us to apply. And I was able to meet David in Portland because it's nearby. And that's how I got into the database. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dustin.
Similar, actually, in a lot of ways, where I became aware of Clowns Without Borders in, I think, 2013, 2012, and it was, I was only even vaguely aware of like that clowning was a thing that it is. And yeah, I ended up going to Del Arte International as well, and always kind of thinking that it was kind of a goal or, you know, a bucket list thing, but to use performance experience and music and comedy to do a project like that and to work with CWB. And as soon as I graduated, I guess sent in an application or a CV back in like 2014 after I finished the program, and then I didn't hear back until 2019, I guess. And I was asked, I don't know really what happened there, but then I obviously replied, and I got a couple good, so some friends put in a good word for me, and then all of a sudden I was on tour.
Well, so my story, I've been involved in clowning for a number of years. I've known about Clowns Without Borders probably for about 20 years, partly from when I went to school in San Francisco at the Clown Conservatory, and familiar with the work of Moshe Cohen, who I think he was the very involved at that time. And I just, I think around 2016, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this. I've been thinking about it for years. I'm gonna get on tour. I've been wanting to do this. So it was arranged that I was gonna go to Turkey and Lebanon. And that trip fell through for political and reasons of safety. We did not end up going. So I just, you know, I've been in the database for a really long time. I've known people in Clowns Without Borders. I've always wanted to do it, and finally I got the chance last year. So it just worked out really well.
For those of you on Facebook Live, as you can see, there are a lot of different timelines, and the process of casting a tour involves a magical juggle of what, when is somebody available? And sometimes, as Melissa experienced, we cast a tour and then the tour gets canceled. We also are trying to match together personalities on a team and complementing skill sets. And there's also a lot of preparation for any tour, but especially for sort of artists who are joining for the first time. And so I'd love to know how you prepared for your first tour.
I definitely I did some thinking about snacks. There was a strong recommendation that to bring snacks that would make you feel secure. And
Sorry.
I feel like this was a very strong recommendation from Naomi. But I guess the most important thing for me was actually talking to the other clowns that was on tour, going on tour with me, and talking to our organizer in Palestine to sort of understand how we wanted to work together. So figuring out what instrument or skills I should focus on bringing, and even like costume pieces, and then sort of allowing that to frame my preparation.
I don't remember. It was kind of happened pretty quick, and I was in actually school at the time, working on a bachelor's degree, so a huge part of it was rescheduling all my exams and and talking to all the administrators and stuff and getting a month off of classes. And then yeah, I mean, I had to buy some equipment for my mandolin, like a little amplifier and stuff. I didn't bring snacks, but we started in Sarajevo and I bought like 9 pounds of Turkish delight. So that was yeah. But I think it was I think it was an accident. I think I was, I don't know. But yeah, I mostly was just like, I knew I was going with two really experienced people, and I tried to reach out to them, and they were both just kind of like, don't worry about it. We'll go with the flow. So I just kind of tried to not psych myself out too much, and put some trust in them that they would take care of me, and then they did.
I like to be prepared. So I spent weeks going around and getting new costume pieces and a pile of snacks and like stuff for emergencies. And I had a huge amount of props and equipment, like a big suitcase of just snacks and equipment and props, which I brought and didn't use barely any of them. So, because you don't know, right? You're just like, I might need these, and you know, I might need that. And so I just brought a lot of toys. And some of them I ended up using, and a lot of them just, I hauled them around for a month.
I guess I really emphasize packing snacks. That was maybe tells you a lot about what I was thinking about last year. And before we talk more about the show creation and the team, I'd love to know, like, what's a golden moment of that tour? What's a memory that really sticks out, that when you think about the tour is just like feels really powerful and important?
We visited the Circus school in Nablus, which is one of the cities in the West Bank, and it was just really amazing to see the community that had actually been built around Circus, and this gave young people especially a place to come and play, and like what they'd done with limited resources was really incredible. So connecting with their audience, who was a beautiful, beautiful audience to perform for, a really wide age range, lots of families, and then getting to also talk to some of the circus artists and young people who were involved in the school was really, really special.
The one thing that sticks out, I think just because it was so different than the rest of the tour, was the last country we went to was Romania. And while we were there, we got to go like really deep into the center of the country and perform a couple shows and stay a night in some Roma communities. And the audiences were just the most enthusiastic people I've ever encountered in my life, and they were so generous. And the one night we stayed there, we stayed with these brothers who they were touring gypsy musicians, and we got to stay with them, and they didn't speak any English, but I got to play music with these brothers and their families for like 2 or 3 hours, and just kind of eating dinner, playing music, drinking like local spirits. And I tried to tune a guitar they handed me because it was in a tuning I didn't recognize at all. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll just tune this up. And I tuned it to standard tuning, like by ear. And I was scared that they might think less of me because I was kind of struggling to do it by ear. And then as soon as I started playing in standard tuning, they just took the guitar away from me, put it back into the tuning, and then just gave it back to me. And they're like, no, this is the tuning. But they're like, so that was just like this experience of just like, oh, okay. And I just felt really immersed in a really kind of special atmosphere for those whole couple of days. So.
Yeah, actually, this was when I actually wrote about it. This was a moment where in the tour where we had just received some really bad news the day before. It was affecting the whole group emotionally. I had a really bad, like hard day emotionally. And we went out to this little school in this land it was called Parambi, which means butterfly, and did just a little show there. And the kids there were so sweet. They were so wonderful. They ran out to greet us when we came, and they were like so delightful that I feel like being around them kind of completely changed my emotional state. Like I was able to just feel the joy that they were embodying for me. So I felt like, in a way, that helped me see the transformative power of joy and some of the stuff that we do. And I felt like I was given that gift from them. They were just being around them helped me sort of transform.
Thank you. And that brings us sort of to the question of like, okay, what's good, but also both what was hard, but more like how did you as a team process, either as a team or as yourself, process when things were hard?
So our tour was a little bit different in that on the team, we had 2 of us American clowns and 2 Palestinian clowns, and our sort of team leader or organizer, Rami. So when I learned a lot from Osam and Ahmed, the Palestinian clowns, and Rami about the situation in Palestine and the West Bank and the communities, and on the team that. And then I would say, as us, the 2, Pokey and I, as the American clowns, we mostly processed by taking really long walks, I think, and just talking through like how we were working fully as a team and how we were working with the 2 of us and how to sort of best communicate, especially because one of our Palestinian team members didn't speak English. So there was a lot of miming, and we were kind of quite careful to be collaborative, but also to lead the process as the more experienced clowns. So yeah, but I think walking and talking around Bethlehem was our main thing we did.
And Dustin, how did you and how did your team manage when, or if, I'll say if, I know that it was a when, things got hard?
Yeah, it was I was really lucky to be with 2 really experienced humanitarian clowns and people who, and it's not to say that they were like unshakable, because some of the places we would go and some of the things we saw and some of the conditions that we saw people living in were obviously, I'm sure if you've seen lots, it would still shake you up, and it did with them. But I think I kind of had my eyes torn open the most. Like I was the youngest, and I had never seen anything like this. And we had really long drives for a lot of the tour. Like we did Romania might not look that big on a map, but to do like the whole perimeter of that country in about a week was and doing a show or usually 2 a day was huge. And the drives were tough, but they were also time that we all just got to sit together and talk through things, and also have silence to kind of contemplate what we'd gone through. But we ended up having a really close kind of therapeutic talking through everything relation, and laughing a lot, and enjoying each other's company as well. So I think a lot of the trouble or difficulty was definitely like ameliorated by the fact that I was with 2 awesomely experienced people to kind of guide me through.
I guess, well, one thing that we did do is we had a meeting every night, and we talked through stuff that had come up during the day. I think that's fairly common in the groups. So that was helpful, but it feels like there was so much coming at us from the atmosphere. There was a lot going on there. And we were, you know, when you're working in that kind of creative environment so closely with a group of creative people, it can become fairly intense, I think. So if there was something not quite right within our group, it felt like the whole group felt it, you know, like just a little, it got magnified. So so talking helps. It always helps. And the other thing, I'm pretty introverted, so I like to go off on my own. I write. I kept a journal during that time. I wrote every day. And I just wrote stuff that, you know, just about processing all the stuff that was coming at us all the time. And I got my own process too, like a physical process of moving energy out of my space that I do, you know, pretty much every day.
Part of a core part of Clowns Without Borders is we always work in teams. So there's no such thing as a solo Clowns Without Borders show or tour. And with that in mind, I'd love to know what's something that you learned from someone on your team.
I think I learned a lot from Pokey about listening and like letting the process just sort of happen in terms of crafting the show. This is something I've been learning since I went to Del Arte, and I continue to learn because before that I worked a lot as a director. So I like have a very specific like sort of structure often in mind. And Pokey is a wonderful listener and collaborator in that he's much more willing to look at the flow. So that's sort of what I learned, especially in this sort of situation where we weren't all on the same page language-wise. It was a lot of like listening and trying to like bring people in where they could. Yeah.
Awesome. Dustin, what did you learn from your team? Who was on your team?
My team was David Lichtenstein, who is, I think, pretty OG Clowns Without Borders. He often talked about how he hosted the first ever Clowns Without Borders fundraiser in his living room, 30 years ago or something. I learned, and then I was with Sabine, who runs Clown Me in Lebanon. I learned so much about lots of things from both of them, but if I was gonna quickly kind of distill it to one each, from Sabine, I learned that how much power there is, like in just entering the space, like the camp, or wherever, like coming in, and just the second that she would cross the threshold, even get out of the vehicle, she would bring energy, and she would have noisemakers, and her eyes would grow to the size of the moon, and she would just like radiate. And even the security guards, who we were always told, like, oh, security guards, like, watch out, they would be like giggling, and she'd be like tickling them and playing games with them, and they'd just be like, okay, go in. And as soon as we walked in, we would kind of be able to usually change the mood of the whole space, and everybody there would just immediately start following us to wherever we performed. And that it was such a lesson in just presence, and how she could just bring that in. And then from David, I learned I saw one of the most powerful performances I've ever seen, because we were in Bosnia and he was really sick, and we didn't even know if he was going to be able to do the show with us this day. Like, he was dead in the back seat, and he just we're like, are you okay? And he was like totally conked out. And we got there and we got ready to do the show, and he just like arose from his state and put on one of the best single individual performances I've ever seen in my life. And the whole crowd was all about David for that entire show. It was like it was like they would only cheer when he entered the space, and he was just like in like a trance of performance. And I just saw this like amazing resilience of someone that was like, you know, can the show even go on, to like just like Hollywood, you know, Broadway superstar. So obviously I learned a lot more from both of them, but those are two things that really really stand out.
Well, my team was really varied and had all, each one had such different capabilities. Can I quickly go through each one?
Yeah, go, yeah.
Just because I feel like I have a lot to admire from each one. So Anna was our troop leader, and she was extremely capable person. She played music for all of our acts, and in between she'd run and do her act, and then run back and play music, and then run and do something else. And she just was able to keep the whole show going without a lot of, just naturally. She just was in the flow of it. And I was awed by that amount of capability, and being able to switch directions and just keep going with everything and keep it all in her head. Because I kept forgetting stuff. So, and then we have Fable, who's a wonderful American clown. And I really learned just how he could just come in and just take up the space and be really there and present and get everyone engaged with his character in just a look or a laugh, or just, he was just really knew how to connect with audience members in that way, with the kids especially. And then Sohaila, she's a Brazilian clown, and she just had this really wonderful warmth about her, and the kids all knew her, and she just was really, just really connected with the children in a warm and beautiful way that made me, really admire that. And we had one other fellow, I'm almost done here, but they're so wonderful that I just have to talk about each one of them. His name was Ricky, but in Brazil, the Brazilian accent, it sounds more like Hickey, so we called him Hickey. A lovely person, just a really generous person, generous in terms of being on the stage and really giving, giving a lot. And he was also someone that would like perform a little bit and then run and take pictures of us, and then perform a bit and then take pictures. And it was just, something I never could have been able to do.
So
yeah.
Multitasking clowns rallying from being ill, clowns stepping on stage as soon as they step out of the car, and then also learning by deep listening. So the next question is, what advice would you give yourself or try to remember for your next tour? Or what advice would you give somebody else who's going on their first Clowns Without Borders tour, other than snacks, because clearly that's what I'm happy to remind everyone of. But Ania, what advice would you give?
Sure. I think it's pretty useful and important to talk to your team members about responsibilities and set a check-in time. So make sure that you are consistently checking in and that people are clear about who's doing what. And I think also being aware that there is a lot of emotional, people will have emotions to the things that they see, right? These are situations that are not always the easiest to witness, and to allow yourself to be okay with needing time to process that. I think there's this interesting dichotomy about clowning, it's full of joy and laughter and you should be happy all the time. It's no, you're also probably sometimes going to be sad or exhausted. So I think making space for that, preparing yourself to be in that space as well, and then making space for it while you're on tour. Yeah.
Thank you. And Dustin?
I think it's a pretty difficult question. I guess
you can pass if you want.
no, I'm sure I can think of something. It's a lot for me to do with not being afraid of it, not being afraid of talking with the audience members after the show, even though you know they're going through such a difficult time, and it can be really hard, and sometimes you feel you really feel your privilege in being like, oh, I'm coming over here to do this, and then I go back home, I live in relative comfort, and but for in my experience, the audience members weren't judging. They were just happy we were there, and they were happy to have us to talk to, and they would often say, hey, can you please tell people back home this is what's going on, and can you please tell people my story, and can you please tell people the story of my family or my country or my people. And it wasn't really like I guess I spent a lot of the time being really critical of myself, whether I was performing good enough for them. You know, a lot of people would say like, oh yeah, you know, I'm sure you're a professional performer, like you're coming through, like I bet like the stakes of the actual performance might be a little bit lower. I bet it's a really friendly crowd and stuff like that. And it's like, no, that's the highest stakes crowd I've ever performed in front of in my life. And it's not that I'm trying to intimidate people or myself if I go again, but it's to know that like these people who are going through such a hard time are giving you their attention, and there's just a pressure to make it worth their while and to help alleviate, take them away from whatever they're going through as much as you can. Sorry if that was a little discombobulated, but
no, that was really great. And thank you, because Dustin, you brought up a lot of great points, but one of them is like part of the casting process and part of why we work with professional performers, and why sometimes there is that long wait of when a performer says, hey, I want to do this, and when we say, okay, we're ready to cast you, is that piece that like ultimately my job is producing the highest quality performance I can, and I want to make sure that we're casting people who are going to treat every show like this is my most important show, and that there isn't sort of that ego of, oh, well, we're not taking pictures of this show, or nobody, there's no program with my name on it. And so that piece, and it's a balance of having artists with skills, integrity, and also kind of the humility and the endurance to give each performance and each audience member that care and presence. Melissa, what's your advice to your future self, or to other artists?
One, I think, and just echoing what some of the other clowns have said, is communication is really key, especially when things do come up. If they don't get talked about and resolved at least to a minute, it's because it's such a close-knit working environment, it can get a little more complicated. And the other, just about, like taking the pressure off of, am I doing the best that I can every single time? I want to do the best, but sometimes it's that kind of attitude about perfectionism is takes away from the experience, and is perhaps a little misplaced, especially when you're in your head about that instead of being present to where you really are and fitting in the best that you can in the environment that you have. So I would tell myself to look around more and be more open, and there's always a language barrier, but just finding ways of communicating before and after the show itself, because it's all part of the experience, not just turn on, turn off, kind of thing, even when we're really tired. And one last thing, self-care, taking care of the emotional, aspects of the whole thing, and making that part of a routine.
And I often think that our performance, in some ways, the performance is the opening act for the really important performance or the really important activity, which is after the show. And people from the audience play with each other. I love when a song from the show then sort of, you can hear people singing the song after the show is gone, or a game or a character or moment from the show you can kind of watch in duos or trios as kids act it out for each other. That's my favorite moment. My last question, it's a big one, so we can break with alphabetical order and wave at me when you want to answer. I'm wondering how in the months since your tour, how your thoughts have changed, either about what clowning is or about how you view kind of the news and what you read about people in displacement or people in crisis.
Lately, it's been on my mind a lot because of this global pandemic. I've been trying my best to find news sources on like how these people the people in the camps in the Balkans, from my experience, and how vulnerable people and populations around the world are being taken care of, or if they're being taken care of, or what's happening. Because it seems like such a dangerous, and even it was already a dangerous environment. So that's been very much occupying my mind space lately. But even just in general, I really swore to myself when that was done that I would hold myself accountable to being more vigilant in standing up for displaced people and refugees, and in it seriously engaging in conversations with people who seem to have wrong ideas about what was going on. And it's, in a huge way, it's really changed the trajectory of my mindset and my goals and purposes, I guess, in life in general. I'm trying to find more ways to get involved with human rights, advocacy and activism and policy and things like that, because I came back and, I still do the same performances I've always done, the same style of performance work and projects. And it's not that there's no value in it anymore, but for me, it immediately felt more hollow after that experience. To have the most important part of the Clowns Without Borders experience, like you say, it's not necessarily performing the show itself. To have that removed from like the ritual of performing, totally reframed my. It continues to shake me up to this day, and make me feel like I can be doing more. And it's not to trivialize, how art impacts people everywhere and the differences it can make, but it has certainly changed my trajectories, I guess, in general.
Thank you. That reminds me of something that Osama, hi, I see that you're watching. Osama, one of the clowns we perform with in Bethlehem in Palestine, he was part of this video about displacement, sort of saying, hey, actually, I, as somebody who has lived my whole life with restricted movement and being displaced, I have a lot to add. And it is something I've been thinking a lot in this moment, that the some of the restriction of mobility and insecurity that some people are experiencing for the first time are very common experiences among the audiences Clowns Without Borders typically performs for. Melissa, do you want to take a stab at how your thoughts on clowning have changed since September?
Oh, yes, I will. So that's a very good question, because I really am a little stymied. I think, and thinking about it, I feel like it's definitely, deep in my awareness of the displaced people and understanding. And before, I didn't have a clue. I didn't have like, even in my own country, I don't,
Yeah.
how is it? And it makes me question how this is in my own country too, not just, in faraway lands. So I think what I also noticed when I was visiting these people is that, they live in very fragile situations, very volatile situations. But they also have just like a strength and a resilience to be able to live in those sort of tenuous living situations that I just had never thought about before. I never thought about what does it take to live like that. So
and Ania, I'm gonna sort of shift the question a little bit for you. Surprise, which is,
hey.
I'd love to know, why does laughing matter, Ania?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. I really think that laughter, people deal with trauma. I think that it breaks a cycle of anxiety and allows them to take joy in the moment, even under oppressive circumstances. And I think that, strangely, we're all now in this situation where we are feeling this, right? Because most people are under some kind of restriction. Whether that, there's large varieties of that, right? Like, it's a little bit different depending on where you are. But I think that now more than ever, you can see the importance of being present in the moment and taking joy in the little things, to be honest, when the big picture is really quite scary. And I think that what I was so inspired by in Palestine was, it's a situation where these people are living under occupation, and there's really no end in sight, and it's been going on for a very long time. But, they are still maintaining resilience and hope. And there are so many
clowns. Thank you so much. Virtual audience, thank you. I hope that you are all able to find moments of laughter, and if not laughter, then moments of noticing. I think that laughter is a great outcome of our work as clowns, but awareness is the maybe even more important outcome of our work as clowns.